My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
Let's talk about our beloved president. Show some respect. He's in a bit of a tough situation right now since he ran on fixing the economy. And fixing the economy is very complicated. It's very tricky. You need professionals. But Trump is one of those guys who's like, I can do it. I know what I'm doing. He watched a YouTube video and he opened up the hood and he was like, it's the wire from the carburetor and it's on fire. And then his wife comes out and is like, I told you to call somebody. And then he's like, you don't believe in me. And scene.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that aims to build you up, buttercup, rather than let you down. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, promising never to mess you around, baby, or break your heart.
We aim to bring you light rather than heat, unless, of course, it's cold.
So whatever the political weather, take a beat, get comfy, as we begin another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
Now, as we said on the last Sunday school, over the next 3 shows we have representatives from Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens to give us their take on their party's recent election performance and outline their views on current affairs. Please treat this as a series and be patient with the format. Everyone will get a chance to explain their position. We're not here to push back or disagree or fight the facts out. This isn't hard talk. We're here to tease out and to understand. At the end of the 3, on the 25th of the month, Naomi and I will do a special Sunday school where we digest all 3 interviews, look back on them and give our impressions. Today, it is the turn of the Green Party of England and Wales to help us understand their political future and their programme for government.
And we will also run through the trade deal that the UK has just signed with India, what it can deliver, what it can't, and what, if anything, the escalation of military aggression with Pakistan will have on Anglo-Indian relations, and the very interesting reaction it seems to have provoked.
Now, to help us rattle through all of that and more, we're delighted to welcome back onto the show Green Deputy Leader Zack Polanski. Welcome, Zack.
Thank you so much for having me. And can I compliment you both on that amazing set of intros?
Look, Zack, rather like our own Alex Andreou, you're not just a politico. You're an actor, singer, performer, director by training. Do you miss treading the boards?
Absolutely. I think my brain kind of went, no, you're a politician, say that you love that with all your heart and you do nothing but represent your communities. And the politics is often theatre and drama anyway. And more seriously, I think when you're doing politics well, you're telling a really powerful story that involves the people in that story who might be marginalised or oppressed, and you're helping them find their own agency and empower them. But the simple answer to your question is I just bloody miss being in a pantomime.
And with so much of our creative sector being hollowed out through funding cuts and, of course, Brexit and the impact that's had on the ability to tour and for European troops to come and tour here, do you think children are missing out on opportunities that you had growing up in Salford?
Massively. It's been devastating. I got out of the arts because I got elected just before COVID happened, but I think of so many of my peer group who are still struggling for work because the industry has never really returned. Obviously, it was already really hard to be a performer just generally in this country. We don't subsidise that. I think the industry's got even harder. People have to do self-tapes now. That's when you audition.
Oh,
but even for theatre.
I've had to help him do some. They're really hard.
And it's just... before, they would have to hire a room to do auditions, so they would only have maybe 5 actors to come do it. But I have actor friends now who they're seeing 200, 300 people with self-tapes because they're asking them to work for free, film a self-tape, and then not giving them the job. But anyway, I'm avoiding your question, which is the most politician-y thing I could do. To answer your question directly, I do think it's really impacting young people. I think for very obvious reasons in terms of We already are missing working class voices in arts. And so if you don't give young people those opportunities across the board, then it's going to go to the privileged. But I think it's more about the transferable skills as well. That what I got from drama was not just having a powerful voice that can project when I'm on a podcast or on the theatre, but actually what's more important than anything is the ability to connect, to listen, to empathise, to think of being in someone else's shoes. To be flexible,
to work in a team and co-produce something, even if you hate their guts.
Totally collaborate, all of those skills. I think there's a strong argument for drama being mandatory in schools in terms of giving people those abilities at a young age, or certainly being a preferred choice. And I think it's even more fundamental than that. There's a woman called Patsy Rosenberg, who is a voice coach, and she talks about, particularly for young women, often people are told not to use their voice or not to speak up. And actually the very physical act of getting someone to learn to use their diaphragm, to speak up, will engage them politically, because you become more comfortable in your body at a younger age with, I can express myself, I deserve to be in this room, I can speak. And for far too many communities, they're constantly told not to speak, or speaking up is interrupting or disturbing the peace, or you shouldn't be mischievous, or make people feel uncomfortable. And actually, I think we'd have a much better politics and a much better society if people were more comfortable with the idea of speaking the truth sometimes, even if it's uncomfortable, as long as it's done with respect.
Look, we spend our childhoods being told to be more quiet.
Right.
When does anyone ever tell you to be louder? And then you get to drama school and everyone tells you to be louder.
This will come as a surprise to you, but the most repeated by an adult phrase I had as a child was, stop talking back.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't talk back.
Yeah. Yeah, I can.
And here I am today making a living out of
it. I can completely see that.
Talking back's so important, and obviously the caveat, with kindness. So we all want to be loud, but let's be louder in our kindness. And sometimes kindness is telling people that they're, I don't know if you can swear on this podcast, that they're
You can.
You fucking As much of the media attention inevitably focused on Reform's performance at the elections in England last week, little attention was given to smaller parties. But the Greens reached a record high number of councillors, now boasting 859 seats on 181 councils. I hope I've got the data correct, Zach.
I hope this game show dings going in there.
That's number one.
They held on to 38 seats they were defending, only lost 5, but gained 48 and made breakthroughs in councils that previously didn't have Green representation across Leicestershire, Staffordshire and Cambridgeshire. And these wins came at the expense of both the Conservatives and Labour, showing that the Greens are capable of taking votes from left and right. They even nicked 6 from the Lib Dems. Labour's MPs have given off-record quotes to the media in the days that followed, warning that they face threat from the Greens as much, if not more so, than from Reform, with one even telling the media, I think we are extraordinarily fortunate that the Green Party is shit. If they had any kind of charismatic or populist leadership, we'd be 8 to 10 points further down in the polls. End quote. Indeed, even Owen Jones has been critical of the performance of their 4 Westminster MPs, calling on them to be bolder and more radical in their comms. Zack, over the weekend, following those elections, you launched your bid to be the next leader of the party. So my opening question is whether it's because you agree that the leadership needs a little bit more sparkle and polished comms than it has at the moment?
Yeah, we need to be bolder. So I think it's interesting. The media have painted this as a picture of I'm ousting them or something like that. But we have mandatory elections every 2 years. So there's a summer election coming up. And I think the membership deserve a choice. Our MPs are doing a really solid job. We are building on votes. But at the same time, a solid job, I don't think is cutting it when you have Reform and Nigel Farage absolutely accelerating at this extraordinary pace. We are in a world now where, it comes back to the last conversation we were just having, actually, we need powerful stories and we need powerful storytellers. And I think being able to communicate a message that speaks to people, I've been talking about eco-populism, this idea that everyone knows the Green Party cares about the environment, everyone knows we care about rivers and trees. And I love those things. I haven't come on the podcast to slate those things. They are at the front of everything we do and they should be. And the things that people really care about are food on the table, heat in their homes, can they get to work, have they got a job, those very, very day-to-day practical solutions. And I think the Green Party are at its best when we are talking in those terms that people understand in a way, to be fair, that Farage does. It's just that Farage is doing it with hate, toxicity and division. I'm hoping we can do it with solutions, with positive hope and with tangible action. I really believe we can do that. And I believe our policies are already doing that. But we shy away sometimes from the boldness and the authenticity of being willing to upset some people if they disagree with us and taking on fights. And it's not that we need to take on fights unnecessarily, but also we should never shy away from an important fight that needs to be had.
Well, let's have a little taste of your launch video.
A nature and climate crisis, racist riots on our streets, and inequality growing deeper every day. It is time for bold leadership. When I say bold, I mean bold. For years, I've debated some of the toughest interviewers. And when I say leadership, I mean real leadership. I've seen the difference when you can help empower communities by listening and inspiring people to work together. That's why I'll always use my platform to lift other people up.
Now, for listeners who don't know, Bernie Sanders has a brother called Larry, who is an active Green Party member and former party health spokesperson, and who has just endorsed you for leader, saying you remind him of Bernie. Does praise come higher than that?
I think it's pretty cool. I don't think there's a lot I can say other than that's really, really lovely. I think what Bernie Sanders and AOC in particular are doing right now, in America, is the Smash the Oligarchy tour.
No.
I think they're pretty much in the same eco-populist space that I'm talking about, which is recognizing the problems fundamentally of the 1%, the multimillionaires and billionaires who are hoarding wealth. We have water companies that are pumping sewage into our waters, and we are paying extra for that privilege. We also do not have a fair taxation system in this country where you are taxed more for your income than you're taxed for wealth. If we talk about how perverse that is, I was talking to some migrant cleaners recently. They are probably paying more in tax for cleaning the building than the person who owns that building. The pay differential is absolutely huge. So to be compared to Bernie in that way, I think speaks to being in the right moment, which is speaking truth to power. Standing up for the marginalised and the oppressed, which is something that I'm always proud the Green Party have done. The new element I think that I'm doing, or it's not even a new element, it's just a different way, is also challenging the powerful. Because if you speak with the marginalised and with the oppressed, but you're not willing to take on the powerful.
And yet Bernie kind of always gets close to knocking on the door, but doesn't actually, is not allowed to walk through it, as it were. So how do you burst that particular obstacle?
It's a really good point whenever you're compared to someone who, fundamentally in what they're trying to do has not succeeded and go, oh, what can we do this time? I think we're partly in a different moment. So I think if Bernie Sanders had been the Democratic candidate instead of Kamala Harris, I think the campaign might have been very different. And I think when people's living conditions are failing and falling, we could go straight back to the Brexit debate here, and you tell people fundamentally things are fine, and if you vote to Remain, or you vote for the Democrats, or you vote for Keir Starmer, things will get better, and people see that things are just staying the same, and still corporate lobbyists are still toxifying our politics, that it feels like you're not really being represented, and within your communities you still see them being eroded, then things aren't going to get better. I think it's not about me being like Bernie Sanders, because I don't think my campaign to be leader of the Green Party is because I think me being the leader of the Green Party is going to transform our communities. What I can see, hope and plan to make happen is being leader of the Green Party is a facilitation exercise in ultimately getting grassroots communities working with their elected representatives. And also, you don't find future talent, you develop future talent. So finding the people in those communities who want to be the future leaders, spending a lot of effort, resource, time to nurture them so they are the future leaders. I think that's how we're going to change our country. And I think that is Bernie's plan too. I think we've got to get out of this idea that I think fell heavily under Jeremy Corbyn. But, you can look throughout history, which is we need a saviour, someone who's going to come along who can speak to us, who can rally the troops, and then we'll save the day. Rallying the troops is really important. So I'm not knocking charismatic leadership. I'm not knocking being able to speak. I'm not knocking kind of that grassroots movement bit. But that clearly is not enough. That's the first stage. You inspire people and then you get them working on the ground.
For listeners who don't know, Larry calls his brother Bernie Bernard, and it's so cute. And I hope he calls you Zachary. Let's talk about you for a little bit longer, Zach, before we dive into the future of the Green movement as a whole. And I'm keen to know more about your Jewishness and your position on Palestine in particular, and how you handle criticism from within the Jewish community for your criticism of Netanyahu's regime.
It's horrendous. So of all the people who are most critical of me as a politician, it often comes from what I call the so-called Jewish community, or so-called mainstream Jewish community. I'm Jewish. I'm proud to be Jewish. I'm very involved with Jewish communities. And it's important to say it's plural because lots of us have different opinions on this. And I think it's important that the conversation happens with respect and with empathy. I'm really clear that what's happening in Palestine is a genocide. I'm really clear that Netanyahu is facilitating that, and we as a country, in terms of the United Kingdom, are enabling it by selling arms to a government who are committing genocide. I don't think any of those positions are contentious positions. I think they're the truth, and I think it's about speaking the truth. Is that uncomfortable to do when I was raised in a Zionist household? I was raised to believe that Israel was only a force for good, and by its nature, whoever was leading Israel was the person who needed to be supported. No, that's not been easy, because it's been a long journey for me, and it's been a tough journey that's been happening in the public spotlight increasingly more and more. But I come back to the same fundamental thing in my heart, which is you have to follow what you believe is right. You have to listen, you have to watch. And for all that I found it difficult, that is incomparable to what it is to be a Palestinian right now, without being overly earnest about it, when I compare what's happening to innocent people versus the uncomfortability I feel to need to speak at a microphone. There's no debate, there's no comparison. You speak and you do it, and then you face the consequences.
If you win, you're going to become the 5th Jewish person ever to have led a UK political party.
I'm the first gay leader in England as well.
Woohoo!
I'm doing
See,
all the
so
firsts.
many firsts.
Is that true?
I thought it was in the UK, but Adam Price pipped me to it.
Of course, yes. Well, bonus points if either of you can name the previous 4.
Benjamin Disraeli.
Don't look at me.
There's some much more recent ones than that.
Did you say leaders of parties?
Leaders of political parties.
Ed
not
Miliband.
Yeah, well done.
I say Michael.
Howard,
leaders
Michael
of
Howard,
parties,
yeah.
Has there been a Lib Dem one?
No. It's a tough one. It's Herbert Samuel.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
That is a tough one.
you had Benjamin Disraeli, then Herbert Samuel, then Michael Howard, then Ed Miliband, and hopefully, if he's lucky, Zack Polanski.
Lucky, and if people join the Green Party and vote for me before
Well,
July
indeed.
31st.
Well, talk us through the timeline then. What's the...
Yeah. The timeline is that nominations happen in July, so we will know who all the candidates are by the last day of July. Also, if anyone joins the Green Party by the last day of July, they will have a vote in this election. It's not just for the leadership, it's also the entire executive for the Green Party. This is really important because often the focus is just on the leadership, but actually all of these positions decide budgets, they decide communication strategy, or are involved with scrutinising that. So I'd really urge people to really get involved with all the elections. And then voting is throughout August, with the winner announced on the 1st of September.
And then you can do the party conference with the new leader. That makes sense.
Is your feeling that one of the current 2 will also stand? Or do you not know?
I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the MPs put forward a pitch for Green Party leader. I think that makes sense. And actually, in some ways, I would welcome it, because I think we need to have a conversation about what the vision of the Green Party is. And is it a party that is based in Westminster and around parliamentary representation? Or is it my vision, which is, yes, we absolutely want to send people to Westminster and we want more MPs, but ultimately I'm really interested in what's happening on the ground. I'm interested in what's happening in those communities. The Lib Dems have got 72 MPs. I would take 72 MPs any day. That's brilliant. But I would also argue, when you look at those MPs, they are very different people with very different visions of what the Liberal Democrats are. And I don't think there's a coherent narrative. And so I think if you focus just on Westminster, you end up winning for winning's sake. And I want to win, but I also want to make sure that winning is deeply embedded in those communities, that we're really clear about what the Green Party stands for, and even clearer what we stand against. And then when you have that big group of MPs, the country knows exactly what the Green Party stands for, and they have the biggest mandate possible when they're voting, that you're already influencing the conversation before you've even reached Parliament.
When you were on Quite Right last time, and it was sort of in the immediate aftermath of the general election, we were talking about all the places where the Greens were in second, and we were looking at, East London, North East London, places like that. And you said that you do fancy throwing your hat in the ring in one of those seats.
I definitely want to be part of London's first group of Green MPs, and I think we can send a big cohort. There's 39 places where the Green Party came in second place, all exclusively to Labour. 19 of those are in London. So I think London is clearly going to be a huge part of the growth of the Green Party. It is worth saying, though, there's places like North Herefordshire, where Ellie Chowns is the MP, she came from 4th place to 1st place. So actually it shows when we tell a powerful story, when we're resourced properly and we get volunteers on the ground, there's nowhere we can't win. But I think in terms of that coherent narrative, I think those 2nd place Labour seats are really interesting when you see an increasingly unpopular Labour government who is going to lose seats. The question is, are they going to lose them to the Reform Party or to the Green Party? I want a place where Keir Starmer is much more scared of losing seats to the Green Party than to the Reform.
We're going to come back to that.
Sure.
So we're going to go into local elections and then I think come back to, as we ramp up towards the general and how the parties are fragmenting and the voter base, etc. So last week's local elections, good Green performance. I hope I got my numbers correct. Have the Greens entered any coalitions or confidence and supply arrangements at a county council level? Like, might we now see more Greens in local government executive roles? To this very point you're making about building communities and having Green activism within communities rather than just nice chat in The Guardian and SW1.
Yes, no, it is happening, and it's really good to see Greens in more and more administrations. I think that's at the heart of the Green DNA is ultimately a pluralism and working together and collaboration. I think that's also clearly in the heart of my politics too, that this is not about, tribalism for tribalism's sake. It's working out how you can work with other people. One of my favorite things, there's not many favorite things about the Brexit referendum, but we're suddenly working with the other parties and parties that have had, differences going, actually, let's work together for this issue. And I think that's a really healthy thing for politics. Most notably, I'm elected at the London Assembly that's elected under proportional representation. So on a daily basis, I've been the chair of the Environment Committee for the last few years. I just got elected yesterday. I'm now chair of London's Fire Committee, which I'm really excited about. But I have to sit on a day-to-day basis with Labour and Lib Dem politicians, that bit's easier, but also with Tory politicians and indeed a Reform politician now, and work to build consensus and work to negotiate and build compromise. And I don't think compromise should be a dirty word, because actually you come up with a solution that often fits better what Londoners in this case would actually want, rather than one party taking a winners-take-all system. It just seems so obvious that working together is so much more healthy for the country.
Quiet Riot. If you've shopped online, chances are you've bought from a business powered by Shopify. You know that purple Shop Pay button you see at checkout? The one that makes buying so incredibly easy? That's Shopify. And there's a reason so many businesses sell with it, because Shopify makes it incredibly easy to start and run your business. Shopify is the commerce platform behind 10% of all e-commerce in the US. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/promo. Go to shopify.com/promo.
Quiet Riot. Next year there are elections in Wales, and for listeners who aren't aware, you've got the Green Party in Scotland, which is a kind of separate legal identity to the Green Party of England and Wales. And over the border in Wales, they've got a new electoral system. They're going to be electing the Senedd under a closed proportional list system, for the geeks among you who wanted to know specifically which electoral system. Is that going to impact the chances of the Greens getting your first Senedd member?
I'm so hyped for the elections in Wales next year. I think it's really clear that we are definitely on our way to breaking through in the Senedd. In fact, when most interviewers ask Anthony Slaughter, who's the leader of Wales Green Party and our lead candidate, about this, the question almost always is, you're obviously going to get some Senedd members, but how many? I'm really excited for this because I obviously want more Green representation, but I think the issue lies deeper than that. So I think it's a real microcosm of what's happening around the rest of the country, but it's happening next year, which is the Green Party are the party who can stop reform. And by us winning Senedd members, present a much more hopeful vision of what it looks like for Wales than allowing reform to sweep up the Senedd reform we're talking about.
So how does that work then? How do you stop reform?
Okay, so this is
because I'm struggling with how the votes move, as it were.
Yeah, this is really counterintuitive to people, and I have to admit it was counterintuitive to me till I've just done a very lot of door knocking. And the amount of people who say my vote is being decided between the Reform Party and the Green Party. And, my brain goes, we couldn't be in more opposite places on so many issues. But actually, people frequently go, there's no way I'm voting for the Conservative Party, or there's no way I'm voting for the Labour Party, depending on who they used to vote for. So then you end up in a conversation which, a very small amount of the time, you can see the person is explicitly racist, and I'm never going to get their vote, and nor am I ever going to pander to their vote. So you kind of thank them for their time, and you get to the next door as quickly as possible. But for a lot of people, it presents itself as a problem with immigration. But you get very quickly into what I would describe as eco-populism. And you talk about the fact that multimillionaires and billionaires are screwing over their community, that the fact that they can't get a doctor's appointment is because no one's invested in the doctor's surgery. They've known someone who's been, sacked off there. And you kind of get into those very personal conversations where they always have an experience of the community being eroded. And when you talk about the fact that you could be taxing the super wealthy for this to invest in public services, and then, depending on how much time you have, you can have a positive conversation about immigration, which talks about the fact that, we need people in this country to be working these jobs. And then they almost always know an immigrant, or sometimes, if they're less kind of informed about stuff, someone of color who they are mistaking for an immigrant, who they go, oh, no, they're all right. It's X, Y, and Z. And I think those are the people we need to show compassion for and have these conversations with, because actually, if we push them away, if we call them ignorant, if we call them stupid, we are pushing them into the hands of the far right. And whilst we must never cede on our principles and values, which is why I keep coming back to this point about boldness, it's not about watering down or saturating or talking in their language. It's being very clear about what we're talking about. I think people respect that because they know they're not being lied to. I saw an interesting clip today from another podcast that I went on where they were talking about my language being too woke. And that, if I wanted to talk to working class voters, I needed to stop talking about racial and social justice. One, that's
such
really
an insult.
Such an insult. And also, working class justice has been so embedded with people of color, with migration throughout history. Yeah. And so the idea that we have to communicate in a way that reform communicate, or we can only communicate in a way that is dumbed down, is just ridiculous to me. Does your language need to be accessible? Yes, absolutely.
Just to boil it down then, what you're saying is that there is a segment of the vote out there that wants to vote for someone that is basically anti-establishment. And that vote is a toss-up between you and reform. Is that a fair summary?
Anti-establishment and are going to make a material difference to their lives. Now, I don't think taking a big chunk of reform voters and them turning green is like our solution to getting in government. However, I do think lots of disenfranchised Labour voters, soft Tories who care about the nature and care about the environment, Lib Dems who are increasingly unsure about what the Lib Dems stand for, that coalition then becomes really, really powerful. And I don't think the media often paint this as like, some mishmash of you're going to have to say 20 different things to different people. I don't think so. I think being really clear again that there is excess power in this country that is hoarded around wealth, that is poisoning our democracy, poisoning our communities, poisoning our environment. And we are a party that will speak up for the community, that is patriotic. Patriotism is such an important part of this because so many people shy away from patriotism, including me to some extent, because it got kidnapped by the far right. I think we need to be really clear and bold about loving your community, loving the people around you, loving your library, loving your services. That's the most patriotic act you can do. And loving the people who come into this country, who will pay tax in this country, who will allow our country or enable our country to be a better country is also really patriotic.
How come you haven't gravitated towards Corbyn, or Corbyn hasn't gravitated towards you, that group of MPs that have been basically left out of the Labour Party? Because a lot of what you're saying sounds like relatively standard socialist fare, not in
and even those that haven't been booted out of the party, like Clive Lewis.
Absolutely. So I think the first thing from my end, I keep thinking about doing a stunt with a big red carpet and just rolling it outside Westminster and going, Clive Lewis, Zara Sultana, come on down. You are welcome in the Green Party. And ultimately, it's up to these people who are intelligent people who have their own thoughts.
It's got to be a red carpet that turns green.
Oh, nice. Very so true. Like, slowly over time.
Like one of those jumpers with the sequins so you can brush it and it goes the other colour.
I don't think it's seemly for me to be in public, like begging MPs to come over. And I think we've demonstrated even under first past the post, the Green Party can and do win when we target.
Well, I'm not suggesting it as you begging for them. I'm just saying it's surprising that it hasn't naturally happened.
Had some defections.
I think it's wild. If you look at Norwich South, which is Clive Lewis's seat, and this definitely should not be interpreted as a threat, but the Green Party are in second place. I think there's every chance that even if we don't campaign in that seat hard, Clive Lewis could lose his seat to the Green Party if we're getting it right nationally, because enough people go, actually, I want to vote Green now. I welcome in the Green Party. I should say it's not up to me. There's a whole process to it. But as far as I can see, all of his values, or all the ones I can publicly see, align with the Green Party. I don't think it's just elected MPs.
Then why campaign against him if you think he's a force for good in the great total of Parliament?
So we don't campaign against it. There's a kind of non-aggression type of pact where you stand someone so people have got the choice, but you suddenly don't put resources there. And that's something, we'll see what happens in the next election. But I would certainly, from where I can see now, advocate for non-aggression pacts in seats where there are good MPs.
Okay, let me jump in there. The Morgan McSweeney school of thought appears to be, and obviously he has not articulated this out loud, that wouldn't it be great if the next general election was pretty much fought on Farage v Starmer, Reform UK versus Labour, because in that binary choice, the vast majority of progressive voters will so panic at the prospect that could be the last free and fair election, because if Farage gets his way and gets even more Trumpy, democracy will be further eroded, that they will vote tactically / be too afraid to lend their vote in any other direction than to Labour. Do you think that's going to happen? Do you think Green candidates and Lib Dem candidates would begin to think maybe I shouldn't be splitting the vote here? Or do you think the Greens have now got such momentum and the Lib Dems have got so many MPs that they'll simply say, no, we're, unless Labour becomes better on the issues about which we care, we're going to fight you?
Yeah, so I think Labour are already probably printing those leaflets off, like it writes themselves. And I think that is definitely the tactic they will use. So I guess I'd say this to anyone who's in the Labour Party and not loving it, or in fact even hating it sometimes, but still clinging on in. You are giving yourself no cards when trying to influence Keir Starmer. You're giving yourself no leverage in sending the Labour Party to the left. And actually the best thing one of those people could do is join the Green Party, help us grow, and force Keir Starmer to the left. I would even argue if you joined the Green Party and still ended up voting Labour at the next general election, obviously I wouldn't want someone to do that, but that still makes more coherent space than feeling disillusioned with Keir Starmer and still saying that I'm going to support the Labour Party. He has no incentive whatsoever to do anything but to ape Nigel Farage, which we're absolutely seeing. He's attacking Kemi Badenoch from the right on immigration. He's saying that the Tories lost control of the borders during government. Such a deeply irresponsible thing to say. Nigel Farage is gaining, and the only way we can stop this is not by pretending to be Nigel Farage, not by replicating his arguments or trying to do a soft version of it. If people want Nigel Farage, they have the full fat version. He literally exists. The best thing we can do is provide an alternative on the left. So that's the first thing I'd say is right now, the best thing any person can do is join the Green Party, help us win, push Starmer to the left, and then make your choice at the general election. If he tries that Farage argument, there's a bit more legitimacy to it because he's actually presenting a credible alternative. And then it's the Green Party's job to present an even better alternative that can win. But right now we're on track where he won't be presenting an alternative and still asking you for your vote because it's slightly better. To answer your question more specifically, what if people started to worry about voting Green? I'd like to think we're out of that stage now. I think in the general election, previous elections, people have said over and over again, I'd love to vote Green, but I'm not convinced that you can win.
I would say that the Tories, the Lib Dems, and the Greens are all tarnished in the eyes of certain voters with being anti-planning and anti-new homes in particular. And there have been instances of Green councillors blocking planning and things like that. What do you say to people that kind of try to say, look, you really are all the same?
Yeah.
And throw examples at you at times that reforms have been blocked by Green councillors?
I think this one's the easiest one in the world. We just don't get the chance to communicate it enough. So thank you. We need more housing. It's as simple as that. We have a housing crisis, but the homes we need are council houses, social housing, and genuinely affordable housing. What we see over and over again is developers who have infiltrated the planning system. Often they are lobbying Labour MPs. And then when their project is blocked because it's in the wrong place or it's not affordable enough or it's not council housing, they just shout NIMBYs. What we really need to do is make sure that we are being clear in our communication constantly that we need council houses. Now, this is not just some kind of abstract idea I'm saying. I've just been to Lancaster where Greens are in administration, hundreds of new council houses. And by the way, on one of the sites, there was a row of trees and an orchard. And I said, please tell me the trees are okay. And they said, of course, we're just building the housing around the trees. It's not even rocket science. But again, you just get particularly Labour councillors who just know the value of nothing and just destroying nature. We've just found out from The Guardian this week that DEFRA are saying that you can now replace irreplaceable habitats, which is absurd in itself. And then when you replace the habitat, it doesn't even have to be in the same county as where it is being destroyed. Now, the reason why that's important is because access to nature is a class issue. We know that working class communities frequently don't have access to green space, which is vital, yes, for the planet, but arguably just as important for people's mental health. You can now destroy that habitat, sell those houses for as much as you want to gentrify the area. And for the people who are living on the council estates in the area who might have had access to that park or green space, they now don't have access to the neighbouring stuff because they can't afford the bus fare to get there. It's just problem on problem on problem. The bigger issue, actually, is the amount of developers who are sitting on land, which is more space than the number of homes we need with the 1 million households who are on the waiting list.
And that land has planning permission on it.
Absolutely.
So
and they're
it's
just
not
using
a
its
planning
assets.
reform issue.
Exactly. And so I think this whole argument has partly been manufactured to create the division and the lack of clarity around what is a complicated planning system. But the complicated planning system is complicated because planning is complicated and needs to be complicated and considered. But the homes are not being built because of so-called NIMBYism. The houses are not being built because developers are land banking because the assets are worth more to them and they're in the pockets of property developers and Labour MPs.
I hope you don't mind me saying, my observation of this conversation we've had is that you've been a lot harder on Labour than you've been on the Conservatives or Reform. And I understand that because they're kind of your target. You said, you're second to Labour in pretty much every target constituency. But don't you think that kind of adds to the general shrillness that there is around at the moment?
I think I'm probably not giving them a harder time enough, to be honest, when I think about how bad Starmer's government has been. To take your point more head on, though, Kemi Badenoch is destroying the Conservatives. They are absolutely imploding. We saw that at the local election. We're seeing that in the national media. There is no vision for the Conservative society that is not Nigel Farage, but just with the name Conservatives. So, I could give you another hour-long podcast about why people shouldn't vote for the Conservative Party and they should vote for the Greens, but I think people are doing that themselves. So the question then becomes, why am I not attacking reform? Why am I criticising the Labour Party? And being really honest, I largely imagine people who listen to your podcast might be people who are thinking about voting Labour and not thinking about voting reform. So partly it's knowing who my audience are and who I'm talking to. I don't expect better from Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage is friends with Trump. He helped get Trump elected. I think it should be very clear to people what Reform stands for. Reform are a party of millionaires who are essentially saying they're the voice of the working class but only speak up for billionaires. And I think they care nothing for communities. So if anyone is thinking of voting Reform, my simple answer is please don't. I'll present why the Green Party are different. The reason why the Labour Party frustrate me, and I would even lean into anger me, is because they pretend to be different. They pretend to occupy a space that the Green Party absolutely occupy, but in doing so, while still only serving corporate interests, they are both halting the progress that we could have in this country, and I would say gaslighting people who could be voting for them. My boyfriend's mum is Indian. His family are from migrant communities. Labour were really good to them when they came over in the 50s and 60s, and so there's a kind of deep connection to the Labour Party. They know me well. They trust me. We have lots of political conversations. They even promote the Green Party on their social media and to their friends. And they still went in the ballot box and voted Labour for Keir Starmer because there was such a deeply held idea that the Labour Party are going to save us. They've now left the Labour Party. They've not quite joined the Green Party. I could pretend they have. It'd be a good story, but I think they're on the cusp. I think they've only left the Labour Party because they have regular conversations with me. But the fundamental argument is this. Clive Lewis, who is not, hard left. He's slightly on the left of the Labour Party. Say we've got very similar politics. He couldn't even make it on the ballot to be the next leader, and that was in 2019. The Labour project is done for anyone who considers themselves progressive, for anyone who considers themselves internationalist, for anyone who considers themselves wanting to stand up for culture and for arts. The Labour Party is as much of a barrier to progression in this country as Nigel Farage, just in a different way. Do I think Keir Starmer is as horrendous as Nigel Farage? Of course not. That would be silly. I think there's a lot more decency and dignity to the man. But ultimately, his politics are not about change. They're about maintaining the status quo. And so if it's shrill to call for change, I think we can't just be angry and we can't just be shrill. It's about finding the anger and harnessing it into hope, harnessing it into positive solutions, and harnessing it into tangible action. And that's what I believe the Green Party can do.
Zack, best of luck in the race. How can listeners find out more about your campaign?
All over social media. So you can find me on Blue Sky, on Instagram, just started at TikTok, Zack Polanski or Green Party Zack. Also, if you go to backzack.com, we're going to be having regular roundtables where I want to hear from members or people who aren't members for things that they think the party should be doing. So as leader, I could be taking some of those ideas on. And I'm going to also be doing Ask Me Anythings, which I believe is what the cool kids are doing. I'm not a cool kid.
The cool kids like Andreou and Naomi Smith?
Amazing. Do you do Ask Me Anything?
We do.
I'm going to ask you for some tips. Apparently, you've got to do it while you're cooking, but I'm just the worst cook in the world. So I'm going to do it while I walk my dog instead so people can't see my cooking skills and go, he's a terrible future leader.
Okay, well, we will leave links in the show notes to all
Thank
of
you.
that. Thank you.
How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
Listeners, once again, it's time for that moment where Alex gets his hands dirty so that we don't have to and trawls the internet for the most egregious Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey. Wokey Dokey.
Alex, come on then. What awfulness have you dug up for us?
Okay, so this week I was tempted very much, and I thank all the listeners who alerted me to it. All the right-wing media are absolutely losing their shit with the fact that judges have now been asked to say, all rise if able,
Right.
rather than just all rise. And apparently this is just the wokest, most terrible thing that's ever happened. But ultimately, I've gone for a story from Zurich,
Ooh.
because I thought, we've got Zack in, and Zurich has been run by what they call Pink Green,
Right.
a sort of a green council for a very long time. And it's embroiled in the most extraordinary cultural battle at the moment, all about leaf blowers. So, so basically, the Green Council there have said leaf blowers have become an instrument for people to blow away waste and cut grass and all of that stuff, rather than just clear a path or a pavement or whatever. In autumn, people use them all the time. They are petrol guzzlers, generally speaking, and they're really, really bad for the environment because also leaf cover is really, really good for the ground. It feeds the
Mulch.
stuff. Yeah,
Absolutely.
it feeds the stuff underneath. There's a whole biodiversity sphere under the leaves. So basically, they've passed a law to say that you can use leaf blowers, but only in autumn and only to clear basically leaves from paths and walkways and things like that, where you're meant to use them. And the rest of the time, it's down to the old broom and rake if you want to do this. Well, this has created a massive backlash. I want to read here from the speech given by the influential head of the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. It's a sort of yearly event, conservative event, and everyone looks very much forward to that speech. And here's a bit of it. Cities are bastions of a lifestyle that considers itself superior and despises all meat eaters, drivers, and leaf blower owners. I'm not making this up. Citizens are besieged by an increasingly dense web of commands, prohibitions, and authoritarian recommendations. Do you not love the idea of an authoritarian recommendation? It's like, you do this or else, if you want to. And then he targets the media. It's all down to the woke media that have made, So the upshot of that is that there's now a referendum coming up.
Of course,
on
it's
these
Switzerland.
flowers. So this is this week's Wokey Dokey. This week, mulch is woke.
Oh, thank you, Alex. I mean, it's layered, isn't it? Because
It's layered, yes. Mulch is layered.
literally, but
You can slip.
the media notoriously woke, right?
Notoriously
Not.
anti-leaf blower, yeah.
Thank you, and listeners, keep them coming in. You can send them to quietriotpod@gmail.com.
Now, yesterday, the government took many commentators by surprise, announcing a new trade deal with India, something that the previous administration had tried and failed to land for 8 years. But by the early afternoon, the right-wing press had focused its fire on a pretty ordinary provision on dual taxation present in 50 such trade agreements, 16 signed by the various recent Tory iterations, including with Japan, Canada, and the USA, and so far not considered at all controversial. Robert Jenrick blew the dog whistle by posting that this was giving preferential treatment to Indian immigrants at the expense of British workers. Badenoch, with no choice but to top that, posted, "This is two-tier taxes from two-tier care." This was picked up naturally by the Telegraph with two-tier tax for Indian migrants, the Times with anger at Indian payoff, and the Daily Mail with Labour's tax break for Indian workers. Naomi, is it even possible to have a rational trade policy nowadays when the reaction is just guaranteed to be irrational? I mean, actually, can any government have global trade policies when all of it seems to be filtered through nativism?
No, and Trump has put paid to any sensible discussion about trade globally, full stop. No, that is the answer to your question. The two-tier tax claim, I mean, sorry, is that the new Peter Piper picked a peck of people? Two-tier taxes, two-tier kit. I mean, say that on repeat and not get your tongue twisted.
I mean, especially sorry,
yeah.
just let me swear a little bit, because for the fucking Telegraph to take a break from campaigning for no tax for non-doms, no tax for private schools, no tax for large landowners.
They hate double taxation, and this gets rid of it.
Do you know what I mean?
For British people,
but they
as
take
well as
a
Indian
break
people.
from that and go, oh no, not this one.
No, double tax them and ourselves.
I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that had Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson signed this exact
deal.
same
Exactly.
deal, they would all be wanking all over it.
It is nonsensical. As you said, we've got deals like this with numerous other countries. And in this one, it's only for some short-term workers. So it means that companies aren't paying into two parallel social security schemes at the same time. And it's reciprocal. Yeah, look, the right are going to do what the right are going to do. And the lesson from this, of course, is when you're talking about Europe and doing the deal with Europe, which is the one that really matters, and I can tell listeners how much more valuable the Europe one is than this one, if you want, the headlines have been written. They're just waiting. So do it and get the full growth from it rather than just tinker around the edges, because they're gonna write the same headline regardless.
Yeah.
So you might as well go for the thing that gets you the most frictionless trade, that removes all the trade barriers, that helps people travel and live and work, and all of the youth mobility that we know needs to happen. It's not worth doing it for a little tiny thing, because you're going to get a negative headline anyway. But we should get back to India. Let's talk more about this deal. Is it a deal in the sense of a full fat trade deal? Kind of. What it really is tariff-free access. So they've not published the full trade deal yet. It's going through the lawyers and all the rest of it. But from what I've read on the government website so far, it's basically got all of the headlines you would typically see in a trade deal. So things around technical barriers to trade, sanitary, phytosanitary, etc., mobility. But each one is very, very thin.
Yeah.
Very, very thin. There may be more detail at a later date, but effectively what it's doing is saying, we're going to have tariff-free trade, but there will be a lot of non-tariff barriers still in place. I don't think we're going to be, lowering our food standards or welfare standards or any of that kind of stuff, which is to be expected. But you're right.
I mean,
the Tories didn't manage to get it over the line. How many Diwalis was it meant to have been done by that came and went?
I mean, it's interesting because I guess it's more of an achievement in context because India is incredibly protectionist. And so it's unexpected. And I think the reason it happened is because there was a convergent interest from both the UK and India to kind of fire a shot really across the Atlantic to Trump to say, we have other options. Both took advantage of the moment, and I think well done to them for that. I think it's effective in that way. No, of course, it's not a deal that's worth a massive amount of money. But again, trade is something that builds over time. And so something that begins that process might be a good thing. There are obviously concerns about standards for workers in India and exploitation and salaries and all of that. But if you are effectively talking about a straight swap with the sort of thing you would be importing from China, then it is a step up from that. And so, again, it's a kind of improvement.
I have had some fashion industry people message me in the last 24 hours saying this is not good.
Because of the textile part.
Because of the textile part. Because, while it will mean that British consumers probably have cheaper fashion items to purchase, it will come at the expense of labour standards, and that something like 100% of the factories that were surveyed recently, not the factory owners, but the staff, that there was exploitation.
But again, I mean, what I would say on that is, are the conditions worse than the Chinese factories from which we know two of the largest online retailers source their fast fashion? And the answer is probably not.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Zach, you might, but look, wouldn't it be ideal if we were still a member of a bloc of 500 million consumers with which we could say, we're only signing a deal with you if you promise to put protections in place hither and there.
We had so much leverage over
and we had so much
rights.
more leverage, but the size of our market means we cannot make demands of them in the way that we used to. That soft power to improve labour rights across the world has taken a hit, without question.
Quiet Riot.
This episode is brought to you by Loom by Atlassian. Are you feeling stuck at work? Get your team unstuck with Loom video messaging and move work forward. Use Loom to simultaneously record both your screen and yourself to share a quick update, provide feedback, train a colleague, and everything in between. Plus, add Loom AI to your meetings for instant written notes and recordings. Try Loom today at Loom.com. That's LOOM.com.
Quiet Riot.
Is it significant, do you think, that Badenoch did not go on this for PMQs? I was quite surprised, considering how much noise the Conservatives were making about this yesterday, that she went on winter fuel payments with a dose of net zero scepticism in the mix, as she tends to do quite a lot recently. Let's have a little listen.
Energy bills on fossil fuel have fluctuated massively in the last 3 years because we're exposed to the international market. The only way to get bills down is to go to renewable energy. It's something she used to believe in. Mr. Speaker, I've got the Shadow Chancellor here, his previous words. Net zero, the shift must happen now as a matter of urgency. His words, it's no longer an environmental issue. Energy independence should be reviewed as part of our national security. He must have our lines, I think, Mr. Speaker. But what about the Leader of the Opposition herself? This is what she said. We believe that green trade and investment will be the future-proofing force that will help us create better tomorrow. And then she went on to say this, Mr. Speaker. It's long-term investment in nuclear and renewables that will reduce our dependencies on fossil fuels and keep down consumer costs. Now, she's got a reputation, apparently, for straight talking. She was right then, wasn't she?
Mr. Speaker, this approach This approach to net zero is irrational. It's doomed to fail. Those aren't my words, they're Tony Blair's.
Zack, 5 or 6 years ago, Britain, and to a large extent the world, I would say, seemed to be heading towards a consensus on climate change action. Outright denial had sort of turned to obstruction and delay, which was still a step forward. How damaging is it to have returned to this being contestable territory again?
It's phenomenally damaging. I think, it's not like other crises, they can kind of ebb and flow, but the clock isn't ticking. But actually, the clock is ticking, and it's ticking urgently, and every year of inaction creates more action that we need because of the feedback loops and the drop-off. I think Naomi put it right with the trade deal when you said the right are going to do what they're going to do, and they are. And so I think the kind of corrosive narratives around this have allowed the denial to become delay, but it seems to be going back to denial as well, or at least rejection of the science. And this is all very grim, but I think the positive thing is The Guardian had some research out recently that said people massively underestimate how much other people care about the climate. They often say, I really care about it, but I imagine other people don't. And as they survey people, they said, we're told constantly by mainstream media that, this isn't, people are more interested in their self-interests and they're selfish. But I always think about when COVID hit, other than people who had to look after themselves for totally understandable reasons, lots of people's first reaction was, how can I help? How can I get on a mutual aid group? How can I provide support? How can I create community? And I think it's the same thing with climate. I think when we allow people to speak to our better angels and we provide the services to do that, I think people will do the right thing. I think just at the moment, community is being eroded, community is being destroyed, and people are being, through successive years of austerity and underinvestment. And I think as soon as we get money back into the economy in terms of spent on our public services and improve people's living standards, I feel like tackling the climate crisis will just be an obvious thing to do.
Might it actually help the Green Party to be the people out there with a crystal clear position in
like
this?
you say, you can't out anti-immigrant Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
Surely nobody should be able to out eco the Green Party.
Yeah, and I think that's right. I think we are already in that place. What I would say is, though, when you ask people about the Green Party, even if they've never heard a Green Party politician speak, they know we care about the climate crisis.
Yeah.
So in some ways, I'm very out there with it. It's the thing I care, deeply about. But also, it's rarely the helpful thing to talk about because everyone knows I care about it. People might not know that, I was hugely in favour of Remain and I really support the European Union, that I want a universal basic income, that I support proportional representation. So I think these ideas are often the things that I like to put at the forefront because there may be things people don't know about us.
The Greens are mostly ignored by media. Certainly, they don't get the sort of attention that Reform get with a similar number of MPs. But whenever they do engage with you, it's always on the basis of taxation. It's like, how much are you going to put up taxes by? How can we work towards a fair tax system when the reaction from the media has such a clear wealth agenda behind it? They will literally say that withdrawing a tax exemption from private schools is a bad thing, but eliminating double taxation for a person that works for an Indian company
also
is a terrible thing.
Yeah. I think it's where Gary Stevenson's been really interesting because I think he has cut through on this argument. In fact, I had lunch with him recently to talk about in the ways we communicate, how can we get people to care about these things. I think it's right. I think there's two things there. One is a tactic I've tried and I'm trying increasingly, we'll see how it works, is to ask the media who's funding them or whoever, from the right-wing think tank that I'm debating with, who's funding you to say these things? And frequently they won't say, and it's very, very opaque. And I think the audience at home, i.e. citizens of this country, deserve to know when people are being paid. So then it's not a surprise that also if these people are the same people who are funding TV channels or TV companies, that they are going to be very hostile to anyone who suggests the idea that we should pay a little bit more. And I think the second part of this question that comes back to my disappointment with the Labour Party, if I get there again, is, people will understandably say, Tories destroyed the economy, Labour have only been in 9-10 months, what do you expect from them? But they have set these fiscal rules, which are entirely imaginary, do not need to happen. Every progressive economist says this is going to push child poverty further, it's going to wreck the economy, and it's not going to fund our public services. We need to spend to invest. And the reason why this is so corrosive is because the Labour Party could be making a different argument, which is rather than saying we need to stick to our fiscal rules. They could be saying there's lots of power or lots of wealth in this country. Let's redistribute it around the economy. I don't even think that's like particularly the strongest left-wing position. I think it's just common sense at this point.
As we are in the region, there has, of course, been a huge escalation of the tension between India and Pakistan after Indian strikes in retaliation to a deadly militant attack on Indian tourists in Pahalgam last month. Do you think we're about to see more instability, or is this likely to stay in the tit-for-tat sphere? I mean, none of us are foreign policy experts or experts on the region. We'll try to get someone to speak on a special episode. But what's your instinct?
I mean, it's terrifying, is my instinct.
Yeah.
I think we're already in really scary times.
These are two nuclear powers.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's our relationship with NATO as well, with Donald Trump, who's talking about annexing Greenland. So it just feels like the entire world is totally unstable, and people that we have relied on as allies and had a so-called special relationship with are also deeply unreliable partners. This, again, to come back to the European Union question, was the exact reason to be in a bloc with people that you share values with. And even when some of those countries, European Union is not perfect. There are countries that have clearly swung to the right in the last few years that would be very difficult neighbours to be working with, but it would make so much more sense to have an actual formal relationship with them where you can compromise and negotiate and have leverage to create change. So we don't have that. We've got two nuclear powers who have historically had a very, to underestimate to say, a tense relationship, all kicking off again. I don't think you need to be a foreign expert to go, that's really not good. And is going to require calm heads, diplomacy, and true global leadership, which we rarely see on the international stage anymore. I can't think of a truly wonderful global politician at this point.
I hope and pray that it is yet another one of the relatively regular peaks in the tension of the relationship. And I think most commentators are expecting there to be some kind of retaliation from Pakistan in relation to the Indian provocation that came from the terrorist attack. So, ding, ding, ding. But that once that is out the way, then diplomacy can kick in, and they're sounding relatively hopeful that this will kind of be a history. Doesn't often repeat, but it usually rhymes, and you can have some sense of what's happening. All caveated with the world is such a different place. And Trump's guarantees on NATO not being there does give everyone major cause for concern when there are skirmishes anywhere in the world now. And
I was going to say, because this sort of thing, he was quite sure couldn't happen.
Indeed.
While he was in charge.
Well,
that is his shtick on Ukraine.
Everything.
That is his shtick on Gaza. That this never would have happened if I were in charge, because they wouldn't dare sort of start some kind of escalation. But we're seeing it now happen between India and Pakistan, and he does have good relations with India. Modi was just there.
So Modi has good relation with Putin.
So why does he not pick up the phone and talk to his friend, since he's such a great deal maker?
Do you think Trump has a plan? I always can never quite work out whether. So he's just reacting moment to moment how he feels. It's not kind of a massive.
I don't think he's even reacting moment to moment. Okay. I think he's now quite scattered.
Right.
He seems to me. He seems to me like, a sort of uncle I used to have who used to tell the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
And the story itself was very engaging. And if you'd never heard the story before, you would think he was very sharp for his age. But if you spent a couple of hours with him, you'd hear the same story 3 times and think, oh shit.
Yeah. Totally. This is like the obsession with shower heads as well. And some of the obsessions.
All of that, golden domes and
But do you think that's healthier than Project 2025? I'm elected now. I'm here to get this done. But I guess it's the people around Trump.
That's the problem. That while he's doing that, there are people around him who are putting that in.
Which didn't necessarily happen the first time.
If he does lose capacity, we get JD Vance, who will push through that very clear policy agenda. Right, we need something to cheer us up, Alex.
Oh my God, we need something to cheer us up.
Yes, I was going to say actually that this week has been a fairly upbeat episode, ending on the threat of nuclear war. I guess it is perhaps time for some good news.
I watched Threads last Christmas for the first time ever.
Did you?
Yeah, no, don't watch that at Christmas.
No, don't. Christmas anytime. It's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. I want good news.
What have you got for us today, Naomi?
Well, hopefully the beginning of the end of using animals in scientific research. Did either of you know that an astonishing 90 to 95% of drugs that pass animal tests go on to fail in human clinical trials?
I did not know that.
Neither did I.
I didn't know.
And that is, of course, driving up the cost of drugs, harming millions and millions of animals, and delivering far too few tangible results for patients in life and death circumstances. And we don't really know why.
I mean, I guess we'd have to see the comparative statistics for drugs that are not tested,
right,
to know whether that.
Well, I'll get to that. Here comes the good news.
Okay.
We don't know why, but it could be due to differences in anatomy, physiology, lifespan, disease characteristic. Because although humans and animals share a lot of genes, studies are now beginning to show that there could be quite functional differences between organ and body systems that may result in translational limitation. Now, it's really common for mice, rats, beagles, and sometimes primates, among other animals, to be used en masse to test drugs. But now, the FDA and the NIH have said they will prioritize funding for experiments that do not use animals in their testing. And instead, they're going to tilt cash towards a range of better approaches, including like AI-based computational methods of toxicity and cell lines, but also lab-grown organs. So we often talk about lab-grown meat and how that might revolutionize, the ending of the industrial slaughter of animals. But now, of course, they can lab-grow a lung, a liver, a kidney, whatever, to do the tests on. And the NIH are now going to publicly report on research spending annually to measure progress towards the reduction of funding for animal studies and an increase in the funding for human-based approaches. And it's going to leverage a lot of the same techniques that allow us to have, as I said, lab-grown meat and growing kind of semi-functioning organs that when you then combine it with technology and AI can provide a really good working replica of a human organ. And it's already happening. So technologies have been demonstrated in a lung on a chip that combines modern tissue engineering with advanced microfabrication. And as somebody who cares so deeply about animals and sentient animals and animals with a central nervous system, etc., and who is a really big fan of the horror film 28 Days Later. And boy, I cannot wait for a month's time when 28 Years Later comes out. But of course, the whole show begins with the rage virus having been tested on chimpanzees and one of them gets out. So look, I think this is going to be good for everyone. It might kill off a very good genre of horror.
And avert the zombie apocalypse.
Well, indeed. So there you go.
Yeah, that's
good
genuinely
news.
good news. Beagles?
I know.
Beagles?
I know.
And shout out to the
Seriously,
Beagle crew.
Did they think, what's the cutest breed of dog we can
And one of the most intelligent as well, just to add to the cruelty.
Anyway, listeners, we'll drop a link in the show notes so that you can not just grin, but also share it.
And that's it for Quiet Riot this week. A huge thank you to Zack for being with us today.
I've loved it. Thank you both so much.
Remember, you can find links in the show notes to Zack's campaign, alongside links to the stories we featured in Grin and Share It.
Do sign up to back us at ko-fi.com/QuietRiotPod if you haven't already. It costs us £5 a month, or at least double that if you're
Pirate.
or at least double that if you're a higher rate taxpayer. If you can't stretch to a monthly sub, don't worry, but do go and leave us a glowing review wherever you get your podcasts right now. Do it. Just do it.
We'll be back on Sunday, but for now, it's a massive thank you from me and farewell.
And an even bigger thank you from me and ciao. We love you. Bye.
Bye.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu, and edited by me, Alex Reese. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot.